Hey everyone, and welcome to One Story Building, the storytelling podcasts about the storytellings that happen when storytellers tell them to us. Today's guest is Alexander Lorian, local Australian filmmaker with a new movie coming out, Good for Nothing Blues. We'll get to that later. So, Alexander, is it Alex or Alexander? What should I call you?
You can call me Alex. I put my full name on the poster, but people mostly call me Alex. Yeah, so.
Well, fantastic. What got you into filmmaking? Was it always film that you wanted to get into, or was it we were late bloomer to filmmaking? What made you want to start making films?
Well, when I was very young, like 5 to 10 years old, I made some sort of silly little movies with my family video camera and stuff, and my siblings. And I think the first one that I ever did that I can remember was on a holiday once, and it was called Hercules, and it was just like the Disney movie Hercules, but it was a bit ridiculous. It was random monsters would attack Hercules, who I was playing, and there was the the centaur, and I hit it with the sword once and it died. And then there was the Hydra, and I hit it with the sword once and it died. And then there was a bear, because I couldn't think of anything else, and that took 3 hits because no boss. Somehow the bear was the toughest. Yeah.
How did you get these creatures in there? How did you show a Hydra?
It was just my sister.
Okay, she was doing this. She was holding up her hands and her feet. Okay. Did you edit in Windows Movie Maker?
I did not edit it. Back then it was editing in camera. So if you didn't like a take, rewind the tape in the camera, high 8 tapes, and just start recording again and hope that you get the cut right. Or just like fiddle with it until you get right on the right mark to cut.
Do you think that kind of archaic training has made you a better filmmaker? Or if you were born when Premiere Pro was already around, do you think that everything would have worked out the same?
Well, I don't really know, because I think maybe about the age of 12 was the last movie I made until I was in my early 20s. So hard to say. I think I had a big, don't know if that affected it.
Well, your new movie, Good for Nothing Blues, is coming out very, very soon. Could you tell us, could you give us a little bit of a synopsis of the story of this movie?
Yep. So Good for Nothing Blues is about a young man named Calvin. He's basically the epitome of a person who fails at everything. And he's struggling to find his place in the world. He's unemployed. He's living on the dole. He's living with 3 other mates who are also on the dole. And they're just sort of like wasting their lives away. And then they win lottery. They win about $200,000. So it's quite a lot of money for them, but it's not enough to like settle them for life or anything. And so, having never experienced that kind of money before, they decide to invest it in things that which is drugs and gambling, which leads them down a pretty chaotic path. And so there's that main story of the guys getting in a lot of trouble. There's gangsters, cops, debts, that kind of thing. And then there's the underlying story of Calvin, which is a more personal thing about him trying to find a place in the world, trying to find love and purpose and respect of other people. And yeah, that's what it's about.
So I'm going to ask you the worst question in the world. You ready? Where did you get your idea for this movie? And why didn't you think of this idea a year earlier or a year later?
I thought of this idea, I think it was in about 2015 or 2016. It was while I was either towards the end of writing or beginning of shooting Subject 36, which was my previous movie. And the idea, it was just sort of loosely inspired by my experiences when I was right out of high school, mostly in the sense of feeling lost and useless and that sort of thing, because I was on the dole for a while. Calvin's a very different character from me, really, but it's sort of, it's got that loose inspiration from that. And also just stories I heard from other people. Yeah, I guess a whole bunch of places, really.
Do you think there's any connection between artists and the art that they do and like you said, a feeling of being lost or not fitting in? Do you think that there's more than a coincidence going on there?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think most artists, well, I don't know, maybe not most, but I think definitely a lot of artists, it comes from a pain that they've had in their life, or some kind of inner turmoil that they needed to get out somewhere, and that maybe transforms a lot in the process of becoming a story. But I think they're usually based on something personal. I mean, unless you're talking about cynically made art, where it's just for business or whatever. I think, yeah, most artists have some sort of struggle or pain that they felt they needed to turn into something else in order to get the catharsis of experiencing that, and deal with it psychologically.
Well, I right now would like to go through the entire process of the filmmaking process with your movie Good for Nothing Blues, and that of course starts, I would think, with the with auditions. Really, I mean, skipping the whole genesis of coming up with the idea. How do you organize auditions, and what is your greatest hope for an audition? What's the best kind of audition session that you could ever hope for?
Well, when it comes to auditions, I started by, well, there's a site, actually, I don't think you can do it anymore, but there's this site called Star now where you used to be able to do unpaid auditions. And I've been using that since I started. I think now you have to pay like full industry rates, which means it has a lot less usership, because it used to be sort of like a gathering point for like small filmmakers in Perth and that sort of thing, and small time actors. Anyway, I put up ads for that, having all the characters that I wanted to cast, and when they got in touch, I gave them a couple of scenes. I think most people tend to do just like one scene from a film, or even a made-up scene or something like that. But maybe it's just me, the way I like to do it is to see like the full range of like character beats that I need the actors to express, because some of the early years doing this, doing auditions back in like 2015 and stuff, I find that there were actors that could do some parts of the character justice, but then just really struggled with other parts. They just certain emotions that they got and certain emotions that they didn't. And that's something you can to an extent, but I wanted to try and nut that out in the initial audition stage. Yeah.
And of course, you have to get the other actors in there to see if they can bounce off each other well enough. You can't audition in a vacuum.
Yeah, well, I did callbacks for that. So after the first auditions, we might have a few people, a few different actors that I've got up for certain roles playing against each other, and see which ones work the best.
So when you have your actors, or even during this process, how do you find specific spots, like sets, locations to shoot on, or even props? When in the whole process does that come up?
For me, it came up after auditions mostly. I didn't have the in one block. It was meant to be over 2 months. Then COVID hit and it had to be over more. But usually it was a few months before we actually shot that I tried to lock down most of the locations. In a couple of cases, it was a few weeks, but I think that's more just me failing to be proactive enough about it and being a little anxious about asking certain people to use locations. Yeah.
I really should ask, since COVID has swept the world, how have you, as a filmmaker, videographer, how have you been affected by lockdowns and everything else that COVID has thrust upon us?
Well, it definitely made things stop for a while. I was expecting to have it all done in, I think, March or early April last year. The lockdowns started to hit, and maybe we can get it all done in time. I think this was even before the official lockdown, but people started to say, "Oh, I'm not confident about this. I'm worried about this new virus," which obviously we didn't know anything about at the time. So we ended up having to delay it a long time. The good thing is that here in WA, the lockdowns have been very effective, and they've been temporary, not permanent. So we shot some of it during July, I think, and then a little bit later in September. And it was almost the last thing, but then we decided to go for a scene which we weren't sure if we were going to have in or not, because we thought it was worth getting, and we shot that in January. So, yeah.
Well, Perth is just such a small, isolated place that well, we've been comparatively unaffected by COVID compared to so many other areas in the world. And speaking of Perth, as someone who has filmed Perth, what do you think of the landscapes and the locations of Perth? Do you think that Perth is a good place to make a movie in?
I think I'm sure that every place has its own unique little charms about it, but I definitely think there's lots of cool places that you can shoot in Perth. Some of my favorite places I've shot have been up at the Quarry in Kalamunda, and Fremantle is always beautiful. The centerpiece for this film is Maylands, which is sort of an older suburb. It's like a little rundown, but lots of really nice old architecture and that sort of thing, which suited the style of the film, because it's meant to have this sort of vibe of like this hot Perth summer. It's a bit lethargic, it's a bit dry and run down, to fit with like the character's economic status and also their frame of mind.
So during the production phase of the film, when you're filming everything and filming the actors, how much does the script change when you're watching the actors act? What kind of dance is there between what has stayed in the script and what changes to suit what you see going on with the actors and how you're shooting?
Not a whole lot changed for the script. It's mostly word for word. There are a few actors who naturally did a bit of improv. I think Reese was probably the biggest one. He plays Hank in the film. He just had his own way of speaking, which sometimes took over the script. And if it worked, it worked. If it didn't, then we got him to do it with the original lines. So it's sort of a mix. But yeah, generally we stuck pretty close to the script. I think in the edit, but in terms of actually playing it out, it's pretty similar.
So not that I'm referencing Reese when I say this, but difficult actors, undirectable actors. How not mentioning any specific examples, specific times, specific people, how do you or would you handle actors that just aren't following your direction? How would you handle them?
Well, there was a couple of times in the film where there were difficulties with certain emotions for characters, just some particularly heightened emotions that I think the actor hadn't really experienced for themselves. So it was a bit alien to them. And that was just a matter of, most of this was done before the actual day of shooting, like in rehearsal. But just, one thing I'd do is I'd find examples of characters in similar media that had the same sort of emotional state. We'd look at the kinds of memories that might trigger that sort of emotional state. which was just a bit difficult for that actor because I think they were too chill. They had too chill a life. But,
yeah, I can confirm this as someone who has acted a bit before. Like relationships that you're in and somewhat traumatic experiences that you've had in your life, they affect your ability to act in a good way more than any acting school that I could think of.
Yeah, drawing on those memories. And one other thing which I think did help a lot, and I think they'd worked on it a bit as well in their own time because it was a lot better when we got to the shoot days. But another thing I think helped exercises, like there were scenes where this character had to be like extremely worked up emotionally and stressed out and terrified for, various reasons. And it was literally things like getting them to voluntarily hyperventilate and like run about a bit and tense their muscles, that sort of thing. And that just got them physically in the like state that you would get in from that emotion naturally. And I think that really helped bring out what we were looking for.
So if somebody wanted to make a movie to the same quality that you make yours, what would you recommend that they have in general? What sort of experience would they need, and what's the least amount of equipment that they would need to buy to make a movie like yours?
Well, my film, I have equipment that I've gathered over the years. So, because I also do video for work, I have a dolly and a Steadicam and a jib. So that's a fair bit to get. If you wanted to do it like cheaper than that and get maybe not exactly the same results, but like passable results. So obviously you want to get something like a gimbal because those are you can do most anything with a gimbal. It's just a matter of doing it like really well.
Yeah, I don't understand half of what you're saying. What is a jib? What's a gimbal? What's a dolly? What's the other things you said?
A jib is a crane, like weights on one end, camera on the other end, and it goes up and down and in a circle. Dolly is a platform that goes on rails that gives you really smooth moving left to right or forward and back, that kind of thing. Gimbal, Steadicam is a manual stabilizer. It doesn't have electronics, but it's just designed to be weighted in a certain way that you can walk with it and get nice flowing smooth shots. And a gimbal is sort of an electronic stabilizer, which is handheld, and it's got a electronic stabilizing platform, multiple axis and all that. So yeah, gimbals are more modern tech, and I'm not a big fan of them personally. Just I don't like the general results that you get from a gimbal, and I like doing things manually. That's just my preference. But they're definitely a really good tool if you don't want to spend too much money. And I would also say get a cinema quality camera, like a pocket cinema camera or something. I mostly use Ursa Mini Pro in which is a bit more expensive, but yeah.
So you studied filmmaking, right?
Yes, I did.
Did you learn all of this during your studies?
Kind of. Like I already knew a bit going into it because I was just interested in it. I looked it up on YouTube and all that. And then, yeah, learned a bit more in TAFE, as more the areas that I wasn't as interested because I hadn't been bothered to do all the research on my own in those areas. And TAFE was really good for like making contacts and learning more about the business side and like the networking and all that sort of thing as well. Yeah, because getting used to what being on a set is like, I think was a big part of TAFE because it was very practical and all-round education. But yeah, you can kind of learn all this stuff on if you are dedicated to it, but TAFE was definitely helpful with that. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to talk to you right now about Australian cinema and your movie, Good for Nothing Blues. If it was set in some fictional fictional place with fictional people, of course, and didn't really have anything intrinsically to do with Australia. Is there anything about it that you would associate with an Australian film? Like, what is there such a thing as Australian cinema other than a movie made by an Australian person?
I mean, I don't think there's really anything like completely unique about like it being an Australian film. Our culture is pretty heavily derived from the UK and the US, a mixture of those. But like there's little unique things. It's more about like the recognize like Centrelink gets talked about in the film, and football as a pastime, Australian rules football, that sort of thing. Bit of the slang, bit of the that sort of matey culture. But I'm not saying that that's completely unique. Obviously, you can find similar sort of things in other countries. Yeah.
Do you think stuff like that shows up too often? Do we think?
What do you think?
Do you think that we need a Australian film that takes place in space? Do we need a science fiction or a fantasy Australian movie? Why is it always a bunch of blokes in the suburbs?
Well, there are some of those. You get a mix. My last film before this one, which you appeared in,
Subject 36?
that was, I guess, it was set in Australia, but it wasn't as quintessentially Australian as this one.
That's right.
Some Australian ones. I think a few years ago, they tried to do like an alien invasion blockbuster, but I don't think it was a big hit. It's a tough market in Australia. We're sort of seen as sort of like the US and the UK's dingy, lower budget, slightly tacky cousin. I think that's the perception internationally. I don't think it's necessarily accurate. But
maybe we just don't have the money to pull off what they pull off. Like you said that there was a science fiction movie. What that was in Australia? What was that?
Oh, I can't remember. Well, there was that one which I just talked about, the alien invasion one. I can't remember the name of that. Then you've got movies like Tomorrow When the War Began. There's also a lot of what happens sometimes in Australia is we get American Australian movies where it's all American accents, but half the actors are Australian, and it's filmed in Australia, like Predestination and The Mother, that recent Netflix film with the robot.
That was filmed in Australia?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. All right, yeah, okay, cool. I saw Mother. I thought it was pretty good. I didn't think that it had anything to do with Australia, but yeah, sure. They can use our land.
I mean, maybe check that, but I'm pretty sure it was like filmed in Melbourne or South Australia or something. Yeah.
So do you think that more Australian movies need to be made? Do you think that we need more Australian filmmakers?
Yes, of course. I think it would be great if we did get more. Yeah. I'd like to see our industry boom. I think we missed an opportunity because when COVID hit, I think the very first thing that should have happened was, well, obviously, they sort out quarantine and stuff, would be to get that studio that they're planning on building on Fremantle, getting that pushed forward, and we could have been New Hollywood by now. We could have had all the US productions come over to Perth because they need a place where they don't have to worry about the crew getting COVID or the cast getting COVID.
Yeah, a nice small town, and we can just keep saying that Heath Ledger and Hugh Jackman came from us, and then just ride their coattails for the next 100 years, like we do right now.
It would be nice if there was more confidence in telling unique stories. Be in the 90s, there was sort of an Australian like indie resurgence in the 90s. It'd be nice if we got more of that again today, with more confidence in different kinds of stories, different perspectives, all that sort of thing, and willingness to be a bit out there. I think we'd have a chance to make our own place in the international film community and get more, cult hits and that sort of thing. And Australia wouldn't, because I think a lot of it is too safe with what we do. We sort of try and hit certain brackets, like the whole Tim Winton / Jasper Jones style small town story. Like half of our films need to be like that, like small town coming of age stories. Yeah, which nothing wrong with that, but
if I have to see another theatre do Cloud Street or Stories from Suburban Road, I'm just going to burn every theatre down. But please help me out here. Is there an Australian movie? Doesn't have to be recent, but any Australian movie that is as good as something like The Castle? Because when I think Australian cinema, I think, well, The Castle was good, and the rest just sort of fall out of my brain.
Well, I guess it's hard to say because Castle is one of my favorite movies ever, but definitely. Last Train to Freo, have you seen that?
Yes, yeah, I've seen the play, the Return. I love the play. I love the movie. Say again, sorry.
That's great. They did it as a play.
Yeah, I think it started as a play and then was turned into a movie.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, when I watched the movie, I was like, this would be perfect for a stage play. Yeah.
I think the person who played the main guy, I think his even though his name isn't said, his name is Steve. He played the guy in the play as well, and they just got him back for the movie. I'm not really sure why they changed it from The Return to Last Train to Freo, but I guess The Return is a bit too sort of esoteric and vague.
Title. Last Train to Freo's got more personality.
Yeah, and it references Fremantle, which is nice. It's nice when Perth things get referenced once and then never again. I can't think of any other time when they've shown up. So you have a YouTube channel, the Dysnomia YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, not that I've updated it much in the past year.
Well, the question now is, since you are releasing Good for Nothing Blues at an actual cinema with live people watching the movie live, why, when you can just put it up on YouTube, put it up on Vimeo?
Because I worked really hard on it. Intended to hopefully make money. Not just going to be I mean, if it just goes on YouTube, it's just going to be another video that just sits there. I mean, it's not like I have a crazy big YouTube audience or anything. This film was partly funded. Jag Panu funded it, not entirely, but he put 4,000 towards it. And he wants to see a return on investment as well. And I would too, and I'd like to see it have a bit more notoriety, I guess, than just some random video on YouTube. I'd like to see if I can get it into festivals, which I think we probably can. I'd like to seek proper distribution, maybe on a streaming platform. Yeah, see how we go. But
do you think that movie theaters are still going strong, but although with so many streaming options available now, do you think that in the next 10 years we're just not going to have any movie theaters at all? Are they going to go the blockbuster way?
They're not going particularly strong. I would like to see them have a resurgence, but it's not looking great for theaters at the moment. I think maybe little boutique cinemas like Luna, where they do a lot of special events, those might stick around a lot longer. But I think we're going to see a lot of the larger chains shutting down, and a lot of the smaller cinemas that don't have like a big sort of festival circuit built around them or anything like that. I think theaters that capitalize on festivals and special events and that sort of thing are definitely going to always have a place, because people do like when it's a big fancy event and everyone gets out, and yeah, it's sort of like a community experience.
Absolutely. So talking about your YouTube channel, I've got some numbers right here that I'd like to crunch. So I've got a list of 4 of the videos that you have on your YouTube channel and the views that they get. And I just want to have your thoughts on this. All right, we've got the Paranoia short film, which is a short film that you made, which has 3,000 views. And then we've got The Place Hidden in the Hills, another short film of yours, which has 340,000 views. And then we've got this Steamed Hams parody based off the Steamed Hams Simpsons bit that has 500,000 views. And now we have Love at First Sight, another short film of yours, which has 1,000 views. So the question is, why is there such variation between these videos that you've made? 3 of which are short films of yours and have hundreds of thousands of views worth of difference.
Yeah, I have no idea why The Place Hidden in the Hills got picked up by the algorithm. It's just one of those bizarre random things. It's really hard to predict, and the algorithm changes all the time as well. So it's just at some point randomly certain videos just hit a threshold of popularity, and it happens that YouTube decides to say, we're going to start promoting this video everywhere. It's going to be in all everyone's recommended viewing tabs on the side, and whenever they watch this famous short film, it maybe shows up in the on the sidebar. I couldn't tell you. Steamed Hams one that got popular because it's a meme. That's
Yeah.
all.
Is there such a thing as a famous short film? Because all I can really think of is Nine, which was then turned into a feature-length movie. I can't think of any other short film that's a famous short film.
It's like a tiny fraction of them, but there are YouTube short films that have millions of views and stuff. When I say famous, I guess I mean YouTube famous and stuff. Mm-hmm. It's hard to predict. They usually got something weird and unique, or something meta about them, or something like that. Like
a good thumbnail.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is there any advantage or disadvantage between making a short film and making a feature film?
Short films, if it's what suits your story, it's what you do. But generally, people use short films as a testing grounds or a way to get their name out there. And then feature films are what they do when they get sort of like a bit more notoriety or something like that. And I think most feature films are the ones that people seek out actively to watch. Short films don't tend to get a lot of popularity, generally speaking, but obviously depends on what you want to write as well and what you want to shoot. I am much more interested in making feature-length stories than making shorts. If I do make a short, it's very rarely under 10 minutes, because most of my story ideas, I like to have a clear beginning, middle, and end, not just like one concept or something, but a bit of depth to it. So yeah.
Do you think that the goal for many filmmakers is to start making short films and then upgrade what they do and their filmmaking skills to then make feature-length movies?
Yeah, definitely. That's what most people would do, I think.
Like use the short films as practice.
Yeah, to learn the ropes, to figure out what they're doing with directing or whatever it is that they're working on. And yeah, because you don't want to go into a feature film knowing nothing and then be like, this is terrible. What am I doing? I've spent, months on 2 months filming this or something. It's awful.
If the short film is bad, at least it's bad for 9 minutes. But I think I've noticed this with theatre festivals, that big shows that are very, very long get more attention than shows that are a collection of shorter plays, shorter shows, short films put together. I guess people just like going out for one big meal rather than having like a taster, because maybe the risk is more. Maybe they think that there's more of a risk of them having a worse night out if there's more selection. They'd rather go out for one big thing that they are fairly certain is going to be good.
I'd say so. I think it's a matter of when you go out, you want to get invested in whatever you're watching, and you think if it's like a bunch of shorts, you're like, oh, they're probably going to be like, oh, that's cute, that's cool, that was a bit of a scare or something like that. Whereas when you're going to see a feature or like a long play or something, you know that you're getting into something like that's going to swallow you up a bit more, if that makes sense. Like that you're going to feel like really connected to the characters, or be fully occupied with one thing that's like feeding your attention for that entire period.
Sure.
And you only have to be sold on one premise as well.
Sure. I'm going to ask you 4 questions at once. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
What is the best movie of all time, the worst movie of all time, your favorite movie of all time, and your least favorite movie of all time? Because the best movie of all time can't be your favorite movie, because then you're not being objective.
I don't think that there is an objective best and worst movie of all time, because I don't think.
What about the Oscars? The Oscars tells us what's the best, and it's always some like drama about someone with a mental disorder overcoming something.
It's tyranny of a certain majority of people who vote for the Oscars.
Do you care about film award shows or award shows in general?
As a point of interest, I guess. I don't take them like too seriously. I think they're usually a bit of a joke, really. But no, I mean, I think there are certain things which I really agree are measures of a good film, like character consistency and not making no sense unless it's one of those movies where it's meant to be surreal or something, but you know what I mean. But like, I don't think there is any true objective measure of quality for films. I can be opinionated about it and say what I think films should be, but that's just my view in the end, I guess.
But surely there are standards when it comes to art and filmmaking.
There are, and it's based on what people generally tend to respond well to. But then it also depends on what group of people you're talking about. If you're talking about the average person, or if you're talking about people who are obsessed with movies, because they usually have different sorts of standards. There's stuff I could say, this is a sign of a good movie, this is a sign of a bad movie, and I could say confidence, but ultimately there is no objective, because it's a prescriptive claim, it's not descriptive.
So you don't have a best and worst movie? Not one that you like the most, but the one that you think is technically the best?
No, I don't think so. Not for best and worst.
Okay, well, if that's the case, what is your favorite and least favorite movie?
I'm not 100% sure what I'd say today, but for a long time, I had my favorite movie as 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is definitely a very unique film. A lot of really cool stuff about it. It's got this very hypnotic sort of effect. In my opinion, it's just like, it's so slow and it's so purposeful in like everything that happens in it, that you just sort of like glued to in such a hypnotizing way. And my least favorite movie, that's hard to say, but I just remember having an incredibly unpleasant time watching Due Date with Robert Downey Jr. and Zach Galifianakis.
Yeah, that sounds about right. It'd probably be similar. That you know, those two answers are very like, it's what a filmmaker would come up with. They say 2001 because it like what they did technically was just so amazing for the time, and it set such a high bar for not just science fiction movies, but just filmmaking in general, as to what you could show and how you could just use a camera.
Yeah, 2001, whatever you think of it, I think is a movie that there has never been a similar production in history. It's this movie that had basically a full big blockbuster budget, created by this guy who was extremely like controlling of what it had to be, and it's completely the opposite of a standard blockbuster. Like, it breaks all the rules, and he just doesn't care. and yet they gave it this massive budget, and gave him like 5 years to make it, with revolutionary special effects and all that kind of thing. I really don't, I can't think of anything in history apart from that movie that's been so bizarre and had that kind of studio level of production. The closest thing I could think of is something like Apocalypse Now, but that's not as weird and not as and Apocalypse Now also ended the new wave of the 70s because it was a financial wreck, went way over budget.
And it's a long movie. I saw that I think a year or so ago in an actual live cinema, and no offense, but I think I actually fell asleep for about 3 minutes, not because it was bad. It was just so long and it was so late at night that I think I just sort of drifted off for a couple of minutes and then came back in.
Was that the final cut, like the new cut?
It was long. I'll tell you that much. It was long. So sure, probably. Correct me if I'm wrong, but with 2001, weren't they going to include like the actual aliens, and then they took them out to make it not as blatant?
They were initially, and yeah, they decided in the end that it was more alien to not show the aliens, that whatever design they could come up with, it was too recognizable, and they wanted them to be such a mystical force, like beyond the realms of human perception. They decided not to physically show them in the end. Yeah.
I think that obelisk, the black rectangle, just sort of just says it all. Like I can't really think of anything that it could have been inspired by, but I can think of something like Arrival with when Arrival, when those squids talk in circles, how their ships were sort of up and black,
if you look at
like that.
If you look at the behind the scenes stuff of 2001 Space Odyssey, they had like so many different concept designs for everything, including the monolith. They had like triangular prisms and triangular pyramids and circles and all kinds of stuff before they settled on the block, which I think follows the Fibonacci sequence in terms of the length of the side, and then that way and then that way.
I think you should settle this once and for all, after decades and decades of people coming up with their own theories. What did the obelisk mean objectively?
Well, I guess it's not super complicated in terms of like what it's literally meant to represent in the story. It's alien technology. We can't comprehend totally how it works, but it's basically the conduit that the aliens use to pass on intelligence to the apes. It was about bringing human beings to the next stage of evolution, because the aliens had an end goal of basically making the human beings essentially sort of gods like they were, sort of like standard consciousness sort of thing, if that makes sense. I think it's heavily inspired by like Nietzsche or something. I haven't read Nietzsche, so I couldn't tell you about that.
And then they turn you into a space baby in an orb in space. That was their plan all along, to turn us into babies. And that's what modern day cinema has done. They've turned us into babies. It's all come full circle.
But unlike that baby is the opposite, because that baby is supreme consciousness that understands all and is above human weaknesses and foibles. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on modern cinema? Do you think that we've had too much Marvel explosions, superhero nonsense, Fast and Furious 9?
Yeah, it's not great right now. It's not really particularly great right now. There's not a whole lot of creativity in the higher budget realm. Could be better. I think what we're missing, the mid-budget blockbuster, like 35 to $80 million, that sort of range, where you get movies that got to be a little brave and that sort of thing, and a bit different without being a sinking ship for the for the studios. Now you get tiny budget ones. When I say tiny, I mean relative to Hollywood. I mean up to about 30 million, and then you get the massive budget ones, which are 80 million plus. And then there's not a whole lot in the middle, which there used to be a lot more.
So something like Joker, where it had the money to do what it needed, but it didn't get gratuitous with how much they needed to throw money around.
Yeah, something like Joker, where it's it fails at the box office, it's not going to sink the ship of the studio, but if it succeeds, then it's, you know, it's good, and it's got a lot of budget for what it needs to do. Yeah.
So how can people who are interested in following your work follow your work? How can they find out more about Dysnomia Films and Alexander Lorian?
I guess you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the Facebook page for Dysnomia Films or Good for Nothing Blues. And you'll see updates about film screening and whatever I do with it in the future. Yeah.
So what are you doing in the future? What's the next film? What's the complete synopsis of your next movie? Go.
The next movie I want to make, I haven't written yet, but I have many of the plot points already down in my head, and most of the characters. It's going to be a story, it's a road movie about this girl who runs away from her home because she's got a bit of a broken home, and finds her estranged dad, who's sort of like this sort of nomadic traveler who's got a lot of regrets from earlier in life, and he's just goes from place to place. And so we've got a bit of a travel movie where they get to bond and fight and that sort of thing, and learn about, you know, their past and what they've been missing and the resentments they have, that sort of thing.
Okay, well, here comes the horrible question again. Where did you come up with the idea for that? Why do you think that movie has come after Good for Nothing Blues? Why didn't you think of why didn't you think of it sooner, Alex? If you're so smart.
Well, I've had that sort of idea floating around for a long time. It's sort of actually at one point it was incorporated with a different film concept, and then it got to a point that was like a different sort of genre as well. That was more like it was following a detective about a missing girl, and that ended up, ended up as two different stories that went off in completely different directions. And I was like, this doesn't work anymore. I have to refigure both of them, and that's and that's how it ended up like this.
You need to well, when you're writing stories, you sometimes have to kill your babies, as they say, as I say sometimes.
Yeah. For sure.
Have there been any potent examples that that you've come across, like in Good for Nothing Blues or anything else that you've made, where you've just had this fantastic moment, but because it didn't gel with anything else, it just had to go?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of an example. There have certainly been parts like that. I can say one thing in Good for Nothing Blues. There was a scene where I wanted to have that went a bit fantastical. It was, this character is telling this sort of like tall tale sort of thing that they're presenting as reality, but it's obviously made up. And we were going to film that. It was going to be a sort of a Western homage, and going to be this really funny story beat that that would have really like livened up that section of the. Firstly, it was going to be way too big an undertaking to film. I'd have to find this very unique location and get all these extras and get like armorer in and all that sort of thing to handle all the weaponry we'd have to have, including some guns that get fired. And it was too impractical, but also I was realizing it because the film ended up being quite long for a comedy, and I was just like, it's going to be too long if I include this scene. So we simplified that section. We cut out the visual interpretation of the story. Yeah. And
And
we thought about having another story altogether, but it added a lot of characters. So we got a bit of that still in there.
how difficult is it to get guns and money into a film? Because out of all the things that would be tricky to put into a film, I would think that guns and money would be the hardest thing. As in fake guns and fake money.
Well, I knew people that already had fake gun props made, so that was okay. We didn't have any particular troubles with the weaponry because it's mostly out of sight, like not like out in the open that we had the weaponry in the film, and not a lot of weapons being fired either. So we didn't have to deal with too many pyrotechnics or anything like that.
So it all depends on where you are and if people are around you. Otherwise, you'd have to get permission from the government.
I mean, yeah, technically speaking, yeah. There are certain things you can get away with. Not that I would have ever done anything remotely wrong, but there are certain things you can get away with if you're just not bothering anyone. Yeah.
All right. Well, the last question is, of course, the last question that I ask everyone on this, which is, of course, why are stories important?
Stories are important because they teach us about human beings and what they feel, why they do what they do, and they give us a guide for what we should do in our life. I mean, I think you should always look at stories critically, like and everyone's going to get different things out of different stories, but I guess that is generally what they mean to a lot of people, is a bit of understanding about where they sit in their life and how they should live, whether it's through comedy and seeing the success of characters, or a tragedy and seeing their failure, or maybe yes, it opens you up to different points of view, different perspective, different walks of life, different mental states. I guess it probably overall would make you a more connected and empathetic person if you see lots of different stories and understand where they're coming from.
And all of that is in Good for Nothing Blues?
Oh, I don't know, maybe.
I guess we'll just have to see it to find out. Not that I have or have not already seen it. Okay. Yes. Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for talking about all your ideas and how your brain works. When you make your next movie, your girl running away from home movie, well, I'll have you back on and we can talk about that. And I'll ask you more about the state of Australian cinema.
Great.
Right.
All right. Movie, I don't know. That's probably what it's going to be.
If what, sorry?
Maybe it'll be a different movie. I'm not sure, but that's probably what it's going to be, the next one.
We'll see. We'll see. And I'll see you then.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for having me on, Cody. Appreciate it. Always good to talk to you.